Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the preview for the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix. According to the drivers, the toughest race of the season thanks to the heat, the humidity and relentless nature of the circuit. It's a tough one for them, but even though it's a pretty tight and twisty circuit, it can throw out some good racing, so hopefully we'll get plenty of that on Sunday. Let's be honest as well, the backdrop is pretty spectacular. But let's crack straight on with the preview. Lots to get through as always, so let's start with a look at the track and all the usual stats that follow. So last time out, F1 was at Monza for the Italian Grand Prix, where Max Verstappen made history by clinching a record-breaking 10th win on the bounce. What a season he's having. But now it is on to Singapore, the home of F1's first ever night race for the 15th Grand Prix of the season. A lap of the Marina Bay circuit is a little bit different this year thanks to construction work taking place at the section of the track that was made up of those two tricky chicanes, the second of which, if you remember, running underneath a grandstand. That section has been replaced by a long straight running from turn 15 to what was turn 20 but is now turn 16. That all means that a lap of the circuit is now 4.940 kilometers long. That is just over 3 miles if you prefer, and is made up of a total of 19 corners with 62 laps now scheduled for Sunday's race. Now, obviously, there is no lap record for the new layout, but for what it's worth, Kevin Magnussen holds the record for the fastest lap around the old layout, setting a 1:41.905 back in 2018, with Williams saying that lap times look set to reduce by over 10 seconds. There will be 3 DRS zones in action for this one, with the first zone running between turns 5 and 7, the second zone between turns 13 and 14, and the final zone, shock horror, is down the start-finish straight. Since its debut on the calendar in 2008, the track has hosted 13 races, with 5 different drivers taking victory in that time. Fernando Alonso winning the first F1 race in Singapore with zero controversy whatsoever. Honest. And last year, Sergio Perez became the latest driver to win around Marina Bay as he led home the Ferrari duo of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, and that's despite picking up a 5-second time penalty for falling more than 10 car lengths behind the safety car. And Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel share the record for the most pole positions at the Marina Bay circuit with 4 each, and a grand total of 6 different drivers have taken pole position in Singapore over the years. And do you know what's really lovely about that? As well as being the number of different drivers taking pole position in Singapore, 6 was also Nico Rosberg and Nicholas Latifi's race number. And as if that wasn't enough, 6 is also the number of dry tyre compounds available in the Pirelli range. Oh, that's right, it is tyre talk time once again. The compounds available for this one then are the softest in that Pirelli range, and so they are the hard C3, the medium C4 and the soft C5. So the new layout is expected to help drivers keep life in their tyres over the course of the lap, with Aston Martin's Tom McCulloch telling motorsport.com that he thinks it will be easier on the tyres because the missing sequence of high traction corners towards the end of the lap, which made the rubber, in his words, stinking hot, means the rears aren't taking as much of a pounding, and the long straight will allow the tyres to cool, which will help obviously with temperatures and ultimately degradation. Pirelli also adds that the track doesn't place too much stress on the tyres when it comes to loading, but even with the changes for this year, traction is still going to be a huge factor, and so carefully managing the rears when exiting slow corners will be critical. As already touched on, it's going to be a warm one, and so there is a high risk of the tyres overheating as well as the cars themselves, with teams needing to keep a close eye on things like brakes and engines, for example. Last year's winning strategy was a one-stopper, but it was a wet start, so Sergio Perez ran a set of intermediates for 35 laps before switching to the mediums, which took him to the checkered flag. Most of the field chose to do the same inter-to-medium strategy in a race that was affected by 2 full and 2 virtual safety car periods. It is expected, though, that a one-stopper will be the preferred option as Singapore has the longest overall pit lane loss time of the season. As an example, last year's total pit lane loss time, according to the FIA, was between 29 and 31 seconds. It is also worth quickly noting at this stage that according to the stats, we are pretty much guaranteed to see a safety car on Sunday because every single Singapore Grand Prix has featured at least one safety car period. As already mentioned a couple of times, it's going to be warm and humid this weekend, but will we see any rain? That is the big question. Well, according to the forecast at the time of recording, we might. Friday is set to stay dry for FP1 and FP2 with highs of 31 and 29 degrees respectively. On Saturday, rain is in the air during the day, but the risk of any rain falling for the third practice session and qualifying is no higher than 20% at the moment. And on Sunday, it is a similar story in terms of the rain, although there is always the risk that those daytime showers shift to the evening. Highs for the start of the race, by the way, are currently set to hit 28 degrees. As I always say, though, that is what the forecasts say at time of recording, so there is still a good chance that will change before we get to the weekend. And your schedule for this one isn't all that far off the timings of a European race, thanks to the fact it is being held during the night local time. That means FP1 kicks the weekend's track action off from 10:30 AM BST on Friday, the second practice session starting at 2 PM later that afternoon. Saturday's F1 action starts with FP3 at 10:30 AM with qualifying underway from 2 PM. And it is lights out for the race on Sunday at 1 PM, and once again, that is in UK time. Now, before I make my usual round of predictions, there are a few things I think are well worth a mention ahead of this weekend's action. First up, this weekend we'll see the start of the FIA's clampdown on flexi-wings, a move brought on after concerns were raised that teams were using regions of purposely designed localized compliance and/or relative motion between adjacent components for aerodynamic performance gain. The directive states any design operating in that way will be in breach of Article 3.2.2 of the technical regulations, which states that aerodynamic performance components must be rigidly secured and immobile with respect to their frame of reference defined in Article 3.3. Furthermore, these components must produce a uniform, solid, hard, continuous, impervious surface under all circumstances. You know I am not great with this sort of thing, but Formula Data Analysis over on Twitex summed it up quite nicely. So from this weekend, the flaps will be allowed to flex uniformly under aero load, but not in a localized way like turning around a pivot. In the past, the governing body has responded to flexi-wing concerns by increasing load tests. However, a change of approach is now deemed necessary due to the realization that teams could be using clever tricks that allow the wings to flex in ways that would not show up when the car is stationary and is being checked. I know, teams using clever tricks. It'll never catch on, but anyway, going forward, teams will have to submit assembly drawings and cross-sections that show the fixation of the front wing elements to the nose, as well as the rear wing elements to the end plates, rear impact structure and pylons. Teams will also be expected to supply similar images to show the fixation of the rear wing pylons to the rear impact structure. All of that will allow the FIA to get a better understanding of how the wing components have been designed and to see if any team has created its parts in a way that allows them to flex and deliver an aerodynamic advantage. To keep it simple, they will now be monitoring more closely how components are joined together now they have given teams clearer guidance. That is a very brief outline of what is happening, but I'll put a link in the description down below to an article from the FIA so you can have a read of everything in more detail if you are interested. Moving on, although it was pretty much confirmed last time out at Monza, it has now been made official that Liam Lawson will race in place of Daniel Ricciardo this weekend in Singapore as the Aussie continues his recovery from a broken hand. It is also expected he will miss the race in Japan with next month's Qatar Grand Prix the most likely date for his return, as pointed out by Christian Horner, although it must be said AlphaTauri is yet to announce that that is the plan. Ricciardo will be present at Singapore though, with the team explaining he will be on site for engineering purposes only and will not be available for any media and/or PR activities. So basically he will be there, but we probably won't hear an awful lot from him. And finally for this part, we have some more special liveries in Singapore. As announced earlier this year, Williams will be running the Gulf Bolder Than Bold livery for the next 3 race weekends to celebrate the partnership between the two parties. And you know what? It is absolutely gorgeous, honestly. Don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with the livery they'll be running all season, but that one is absolutely fantastic, and I will be perfectly happy if they kept this for the rest of the season. Very nice indeed. McLaren has also unveiled a stealth mode livery for this one, which sees black added to the usual papaya trim. Now, the design apparently represents the belief of OKX and McLaren in putting in hard work behind the scenes to strive for excellence, while embracing change and innovation. Okay, fair enough. I do love, by the way, they're calling it stealth mode because with the addition of black or not, you're not going to be missing that bright papaya coming at you in a hurry. In all seriousness, though, I do actually really like it. And in my view, it's nicer than the livery they usually run. So, like the Williams one, keep it for the rest of the season. Go on, McLaren, I dare you. Right then, time for me to make my predictions, and as always, please do not take these too seriously. They're just a little bit of fun, but if you do disagree with my picks, then you can let me know yours in the comment section down below. And last time out, not great at all, but I've certainly done worse, to be fair. Only correct on Verstappen for the win, Williams is top of the midfield, and the number of race finishers. Half a point for Perez on the podium, but in the wrong place though, so that's something, I guess. As for this week, look, we know Red Bull are going to be favourites. We just know that. We also know that Max Verstappen has a great chance of making it 11 in a row. Let's be clear about all of that from the get-go. However, even I am getting bored now of essentially making the same picks every single preview, so much so that these videos really are starting to feel a little bit pointless. So, although I will keep it somewhat realistic and again make the point that I think Verstappen is probably going to win, I'm going to mix it up just a little bit. He won in Singapore in style, it's got to be said, last year, and although he struggled on some street tracks this year, we know he can be pretty handy around them. So I am still going with a Red Bull win, but I'm going to go with Sergio Perez for a change for pole on Saturday and a victory on Sunday. What a confidence boost that would be for him. Although I will freely admit it feels like a bold call given some of his qualifying performances this season. I'll still put Verstappen in second place, so yes, it is still a Red Bull 1-2, with the final step on the podium going to, do you know what? Why not Fernando Alonso? I know that Aston is not where it was at the start of the year, but he's had some pretty great results on street tracks this season, and this was one of the circuits he earmarked as potentially a strong one for the team. Yeah, McLaren could well be strong as well, so don't rule them out, and don't rule Mercedes or Ferrari out either. But there's only 3 spots on the podium, and I've got to pick a third person, so I'm going with Fernando Alonso. As for top of the midfield, I've gone with Alpine. I know Monza was pretty terrible, but that track was never going to suit their car. And so with Singapore being less about power and more about downforce, I fancy them to have a much better weekend. And before I go, it is worth noting that Red Bull could seal the Constructors Championship title on Sunday, but although they will do it eventually, it's not really totally in their hands this weekend. They must bring home a 1-2 finish on Sunday and hope that Mercedes either fails to score any points or if one of the Red Bulls sets the fastest lap, that the Silver Arrows score no more than 1 point. It is possible and anything can happen on a street circuit, but I think it is more likely to be wrapped up in Japan. You never know though, but my extra prediction, if you like, is that Red Bull won't wrap up the Constructors this weekend, they'll do it next weekend. That is it then for the Singapore Grand Prix preview, but don't forget you can let me know your thoughts and your predictions ahead of the weekend in the comments section down below. Now, I will be back on Saturday with the post-quali waffle and live again shortly after the race on Sunday with the usual reaction stream. In the meantime though, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like as it really does help to give the channel a bit of a boost, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.